The Daredevil Connection. The Daredevil Connection is the mystery hiding in plain sight on page 1 of the very first comic. In 1984, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were two broke artists who funded the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles issue with a tax refund and a loan from Eastman's uncle, forming Mirage Studios to self-publish what was meant to be a one-shot parody of the biggest comics of the early 80s, Marvel's Daredevil, Frank Miller's Ronin, the X-Men spin-off The New Mutants, and the indie hit Cerebus the Aardvark. They even dedicated the book to Jack Kirby and Frank Miller, spelling out exactly whose homework they were copying. Look closely at the Turtles' origin, and the Daredevil of it all becomes unmistakable. A young boy saves a blind man from being run over by a speeding truck and gets struck across the eyes by a radioactive canister, an almost shot-for-shot recreation of how Matt Murdock lost his sight and became Daredevil. But where Marvel's story ends with the boy, the TMNT version follows the canister, which bounces onward, smashes into a glass jar holding 4 baby turtles, and shatters in the sewer below, bathing them and a certain rat in glowing ooze. The references keep stacking from there. Splinter, the wise rodent sensei, is a direct parody of Daredevil's mentor Stick, right down to the name being another word for a small piece of wood. The Foot Clan, the Turtles' eternal enemies, spoofs the Hand, Marvel's ninja death cult that battled for control of New York's underworld throughout Miller's Daredevil run. Even the name Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles winks at the New Mutants and its team of under-18 heroes. Technically speaking, the same substance that empowered Daredevil created the Ninja Turtles, an unauthorized crossover that has been baked into the franchise's DNA for over 40 years. That first issue hit shelves in May 1984 as a black-and-white one-shot with no plans for a sequel, and its runaway success turned a joke about Frank Miller Comics into a global empire, all built on a canister Marvel technically threw first. The Renaissance names. The Renaissance names raise an obvious question the franchise took years to answer properly. Why would a Japanese rat living in a New York sewer name his 4 sons Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo, after painters and sculptors who died centuries before the invention of the storm drain? In-universe, most continuities give Splinter a genuine and slightly unexplained love of art. In the 1990 live-action film, he tells the story himself, explaining that he found the names in a discarded book of Renaissance art he discovered in the sewers, one of the most quietly charming details in the entire movie. The 2012 Nickelodeon series takes a similar route, attributing the choice to Splinter's long-standing interest in art, which he carried with him from his old life. Behind the scenes, the answer is simpler and stranger. Eastman and Laird wanted names that sounded absurdly grand for sewer-dwelling reptiles, fitting the parody tone of the original comic, and nothing delivered maximum contrast with mutant turtles quite like the masters of the Italian Renaissance. The joke works so well that it outlived nearly everything it was originally mocking. There's even a decades-old spelling scandal hiding inside this mystery. For years, the comics spelled Michelangelo as Michelangelo, with an extra A jammed into the middle, a genuine spelling error that appeared on covers, merchandise, and cartoons for a generation before it was officially corrected in Volume 4 of the Mirage comic series. And the naming convention itself has quietly become a rule the franchise enjoys breaking. Jennika, the yellow-masked turtle of the IDW comics, carries no Renaissance name at all, and the 5th turtle planned for the Rise series was reportedly going to be named after Frida Kahlo, a modern painter, proving that Splinter's battered art book apparently had some very eclectic later chapters. Their actual species went completely unanswered for decades, because the original Mirage comic simply shows 4 generic baby turtles in a glass jar, dropped by a boy on a New York street and washed into the sewer. No genus, no species, no pet shop receipt. For 30 years, artists drew whatever a heroic turtle looked like in their heads, which is why the brothers' shells, beaks, and builds shift wildly from one comic or cartoon to the next. The 2014 live-action film finally committed to a scientific answer, establishing the brothers as red-eared sliders, one of the most common pet turtles in America, which fits the classic origin of ordinary store-bought turtles lost down a storm drain. It's a strangely perfect choice. Red-eared sliders are hardy, water-loving, and were sold by the millions in the very era the turtles were supposedly purchased. And in that film's version of events, the mutation is slower and more grounded too, taking weeks for the 4 to develop their humanoid strength rather than transforming overnight. But the franchise refuses to stay consistent even now. Plenty of continuities still never name a species at all, and 2023's Mutant Mayhem deliberately gives each brother a visibly different height, build, and shell shape, which many fans have read as the 4 being drawn like different kinds of turtle entirely, whatever the script says. The honest answer to this mystery is that the turtles are whatever species the current artist decides to draw that day, though red-eared slider remains the closest thing to an official ruling the franchise has ever issued. It also means that without a canister of alien ooze, the world's most fearsome fighting team would have topped out at roughly the length of a dinner plate and spent their days basking on a rock instead of saving New York. Reptiles or amphibians? Reptiles or amphibians shouldn't even be a debate, and yet the franchise itself got the answer wrong on national television for years. The biology is not ambiguous. Turtles are reptiles, full stop. They have scaly skin, lay shelled eggs on land, and breathe air with lungs from the moment they hatch. Amphibians, like frogs and salamanders, live part of their lives in water, typically start out with gills, and have permeable skin. No herpetologist on Earth would confuse the two. But the early episodes of the 1987 cartoon repeatedly called the heroes amphibians, both in dialogue from other characters and, more embarrassingly, from the turtles themselves. A basic taxonomic error broadcast to millions of children every single week during the biggest kids' TV phenomenon of its era. An entire generation grew up confidently telling their science teachers the wrong animal class. The show did eventually notice. Later episodes corrected course, and in one, the turtles are openly offended at being called amphibians, effectively retconning the mistake by having the characters complain about it on screen, which is a genuinely funny way to fix your own error. Just make your heroes annoyed that anyone ever said it. The confusion never fully died, though, and it's easy to see why it lingered. The turtles live half-submerged in sewer water, exactly where you'd expect an amphibian to hang out. They're constantly swimming, and the word amphibious kept creeping back into merchandise and marketing copy over the years. It remains one of the funniest quirks in franchise history. A show about mutant turtles accidentally taught kids the wrong branch of the animal kingdom, then spent years quietly cleaning up its own scientific mess, one sarcastic line of dialogue at a time. Somewhere, Donatello, the scientist of the family, is still fuming about it. Is Splinter a rat or a man? Is Splinter a rat or a man is the single most contradicted question in TMNT canon, and the answer completely flips depending on which decade you ask. In the original Mirage comics, Splinter is unambiguously a rat, the beloved pet of ninja master Hamato Yoshi, who learned ninjutsu by mimicking his owner's practice from inside a cage. The backstory is pure pulp tragedy, a ninja love triangle involving Yoshi, a woman named Tang Shen, and the jealous Oroku Nagi, which ends with Yoshi murdered by Nagi's brother Oroku Saki, the future Shredder. The orphaned rat flees to the sewers, finds 4 ooze-soaked baby turtles, and mutates alongside them. The 1987 cartoon reversed the whole thing. There, Splinter Aya's Hamato Yoshi, a human framed and exiled, transformed into a rat man when the mutagen merged him with the DNA of the sewer rats he'd been living among, since that show's mutagen combined a person with the last animal they touched. He tells this version of his origin not to his sons but to reporter April O'Neil in the episode Turtle Tracks, and the change was likely driven by censorship since depicting Yoshi's murder was off the table in an 80s kids cartoon. The 2012 series split the difference, with Yoshi mutating after accidentally stepping on a rat while spying on the Krang. Then the 2014 film threw out Yoshi entirely, making Splinter an ordinary lab rat with no human past at all, who taught himself martial arts from a found book. That's 4 mutually exclusive origins for the same character across 4 eras. Fans have argued for decades over which is definitive, but there's no single truth, only a rough rule of thumb. The comics lean pet rat, the classic cartoon leans transformed man, and Splinter himself changes species retroactively every time Hollywood reboots him. Where the ooze comes from? Where the ooze comes from is a mystery the 1987 cartoon famously never bothered to explain across nearly a decade on the air, but other continuities built entire alien mythologies around that one broken canister. In the Mirage comics, the glowing goop starts as apparent chemical waste, but is eventually traced to TCRI, the Techno-Cosmic Research Institute, a front company secretly run by the Utroms, benevolent brain-like aliens stranded on Earth and quietly working to get home. That makes the turtles the accidental byproduct of alien research, mutated by a substance that was never meant for them. The 1991 film Secret of the Ooze ran a similar play with a company called TCRI, whose lead scientist admits on screen that the mutagen was an accidental waste product, an unintended cocktail of chemicals rather than a miracle formula, which horrifies the turtles when they learn their existence is essentially an industrial accident. The 2012 Nickelodeon series went cosmic, revealing mutagen as a common substance from Dimension X that only behaves the way it does when exposed to Earth's physics, an elegant excuse for why the stuff is so unpredictable. IDW's comics went further still and split the terminology in two. In that continuity, ooze is a raw natural resource from the Utrom homeworld, and mutagen is what you get after human scientist Baxter Stockman refines it, originally intended as a super soldier serum that never worked as designed. The 1987 cartoon's mutagen had its own unique gimmick, merging a person with the DNA of animals they'd touched, which conveniently generated an endless parade of mutants for the toy line. So depending on the version, the ooze is alien waste, alien resource, corporate accident, or totally unexplained glowing soup. The one constant across every timeline, nobody ever meant to create the Ninja Turtles. Every single origin is an accident. Are they actually brothers? Are they actually brothers seems like a strange question, until you remember that one show answered it with a horrifying no. In most continuities, the four turtles are treated as brothers without hesitation, either biologically, as hatchlings from the same batch of pet store turtles, or adoptively, through Splinter raising them as his sons, and the entire franchise runs on that family bond. Then came Ninja Turtles, The Next Mutation, the 1997 live-action series produced by Saban, the studio behind Power Rangers, which explicitly declared that the Turtles were not blood-related at all. The reason was deeply uncomfortable. The show had introduced Venus de Milo, a female fifth turtle, and reportedly wanted the door open for romantic tension between her and the brothers, which required legally de-brothering the entire team first. The show even leaned into its Power Rangers connections with a crossover episode of Power Rangers in Space called Shell Shocked, but no amount of crossover spectacle could save it, and fans absolutely hated the Not Brothers revelation, which felt like vandalism of the franchise's emotional core. Every adaptation since has quietly and firmly re-established the four as family, treating the Next Mutation's ruling like it never happened. The IDW comics went furthest in the opposite direction, revealing that the Turtles and Splinter are the reincarnated souls of Hamato Yoshi and his four sons, murdered in a past life and reborn together in mutant bodies, making them more literally and cosmically family than any version before. The franchise's verdict could not be clearer. Whatever the DNA or the lawyers say, these four are brothers, bound by something deeper than biology, and exactly one television show tried to argue otherwise before being cancelled after a single season. The lesson has been learned. Nobody has tried to unbrother the Turtles since. The pizza obsession. The pizza obsession feels as ancient as the franchise itself, but here's the twist that surprises almost everyone. The original Turtles barely ate pizza at all. The gritty Mirage comics from 1984 contain almost no pizza whatsoever, and in one later issue, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Attack, Leonardo actually says that pizza makes him gag, a deliberate, slightly bitter jab at the cartoon version of himself. The obsession was manufactured in 1987, when licensing agent Mark Friedman saw the Turtles' merchandising potential and helped broker the Playmates toy deal, which in turn required an animated series, produced by the Murakami Wolf Swenson studio, to sell those toys. The expanded universe built for that show needed a kid-friendly signature trait, and according to comic historians, the answer came from real life. Eastman and Laird ate enormous amounts of pizza while producing the original comics on a shoestring budget, and that genuine starving artist habit was written directly into the characters, since the cartoon obviously couldn't show the Turtles sharing the creator's other favorite beverage. The symbolism worked perfectly too. No food says teenager, or New York City, louder than a hot slice. The 1987 show then pushed the gag into absurdity, with the Turtles ordering toppings like peanut butter, sauerkraut, and clams, and donning trench coats and fedoras just to pick up pies from their favorite parlor without being recognized as giant reptiles. The connection ran so deep that after the first movie's success, the Turtles headlined an actual live concert tour coming out of their shells, sponsored by Pizza Hut in the early 90s, in which the heroes in a half-shell played instruments on stage. A snack habit born of poverty became the most famous food association in cartoon history, and the comics Leonardo never forgave it. How Shredder Cheated Death. How Shredder Cheated Death is a mystery most fans don't realize exists, because in the original comics, the franchise's greatest villain died in his very first appearance. In 1984's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the Turtles confront Oroku Saki, defeat him on a rooftop, and the Shredder is blown to bits by his own grenade, permanently, because Eastman and Laird had no reason to believe there would ever be a second issue. Then the 1987 cartoon turned Shredder into the Turtles' iconic archenemy. and the comics faced an awkward problem. Their most marketable villain was already in pieces. His return, teased in the Leonardo micro-series, was finally explained in the Return to New York arc, and the explanation is one of the most gloriously bizarre resurrections in comics. In issue 21, published in May 1989, Shredder reveals that the Foot Clan used ancient mystic practices involving a special breed of worm that learns from and grows into whatever it eats. The Foot fed the scattered remains of Saki's body to these worms, which formed a colony of cells that mutated into a walking, thinking individual. The deformed Shredder Elite Guards were the first 3 experiments with the technique, and on the 4th attempt, the worms consumed Saki himself, reincarnating him as a man-shaped worm colony, carrying all of the original's memories, and an even deeper hatred of the turtles. Beneath the armor, his flesh visibly seethed with millions of tiny worms. Leonardo ended this abomination for good by decapitating him, then burned the body in a Viking funeral on a raft on the Hudson River. Even that wasn't quite the end, since surviving worm matter later grew into a monstrous shark shredder in the Tales of the TMNT comics. The cartoons made Shredder immortal through popularity. The comics made him immortal through worms. Who is Krang really? Who is Krang really is a question with a surprising answer. The squishy pink brain in the robot's stomach, one of the most recognizable villains in cartoon history, doesn't come from the comics at all. Krang was invented for the 1987 animated series by story editor David Wise, who wanted to give Shredder access to extraterrestrial technology and an alien partner who could raise the stakes beyond street-level ninja battles, and who has said the design blended his own ideas with characters already in the comics. Krang's brain-like look was directly inspired by the Utroms, the small, tentacled, brain-resembling aliens of the Mirage comics, though for years fans argued over whether Krang actually was one, since the Utroms are largely benevolent and Krang absolutely is not. His backstory in the show is pure space opera. Once a feared warlord in Dimension X commanding armies of rock soldiers, Krang was banished and stripped of his body, reduced to a helpless brain-like form, and forced to rely on walkers and platforms until Shredder built him his famous android body, the big bald exosuit with the brain riding in its belly. The show even revealed his original form once, in the episode Invasion of the Krangazoids, where clones of Krang regrow their bodies into towering lizard-like humanoids. Voiced by Pat Fraley, Krang commanded the Technodrome, jumped to the Archie comics in 1988, and kept evolving with the franchise. The 2009 crossover film Turtles Forever delivered a clever punchline. When the 1987 Shredder searches the 2003 universe for his counterpart's ally, no evil Krang exists there, because in that world he's just an ordinary, peaceful Utrom. The 2012 series reimagined him as Krang Prime, a mutated Utrom scientist ruling a hive mind, and Brad Garrett voiced him in 2016's Out of the Shadows. Not bad for a brain with no body. Why They Were Almost Aliens. Why They Were Almost Aliens is the mystery of the franchise's single biggest fan revolt. In March 2012, at a Nickelodeon presentation, producer Michael Bay announced his plans for the upcoming live-action reboot and casually detonated 3 decades of lore by declaring that the Turtles would be members of an alien race, promising they'd be tough, edgy, funny, and completely lovable. The internet erupted. Fans pointed out the obvious. The word mutant is literally in the characters' names, and turning the Turtles into aliens would technically rename the franchise Teenage Alien Ninja Turtles. Message boards raged, protest pages sprang up, and coverage spread across major outlets. Bay responded on his own forum by telling fans to take a breath and chill, insisting nobody had read the script, and that his team was working with one of the original creators to build a richer world. Director Jonathan Liebsman tried to defend the idea by pointing to existing lore, noting that in the comics, the ooze in those Tikri canisters is alien in origin anyway, which is technically true since the Utroms created it, but fans weren't buying the leap from alien ooze to alien turtles. Even co-creator Peter Laird weighed in on his blog, wryly encouraging fans to swallow the chill pill and wait, while making his skepticism clear. Then an early draft of the script leaked online, revealing turtles from Dimension X and a Shredder operating under the alias Colonel Schrader, and the backlash grew so intense that the alien origin was scrapped entirely. The finished 2014 film restored the classic mutation story, and while critics savaged it with a 20% Rotten Tomatoes score, audiences still bought over $485 million in tickets against a $185 million budget. The fans lost the reviews but won the war. The Turtles stayed mutants. The Vanishing of Venus de Milo. The vanishing of Venus de Milo is the franchise's strangest cover-up, a character not merely retired but effectively erased. Introduced in 1997's Next Mutation as the fifth turtle, Venus, born Mei Pie and raised by the Chinese mystic Cheng-U, lasted one season of 26 episodes before the show was cancelled, and for a while her adventures limped on through journal-style entries in the letters section of the official website. Then the silence began. Co-creator Peter Laird openly despised the character, and in a 2007 interview, TMNT animated film director Kevin Munro revealed just how deep that hostility ran, recalling that Laird's mandates for the movie included an absolute prohibition on referencing the character, adding, "You can't even joke about that with Peter." Laird later explained his position at length on his own blog, blasting the underlying logic as the weak, facile, creatively bankrupt idea that if 4 Ninja Turtles are good, 5 must be better, and describing Venus herself as execrable. For over a decade, she was scrubbed from merchandise, shows, and films as if she had never existed, to the point where her absence became a running joke among fans, who noted that officially, she wasn't even allowed to be a punchline. Only after Laird sold the franchise to Nickelodeon's parent company Viacom in 2009 did the thaw slowly begin. The IDW comics eventually resurrected Venus in radically reimagined form, as a patchwork turtle stitched together using DNA from a mutant punk frog, with the blue stitching around her eyes deliberately echoing her original cyan mask, a quiet visual apology to a character the franchise once pretended never existed. Meanwhile, Jennika arrived in the same comics and succeeded everywhere Venus had failed, proving the idea of a fifth turtle was never the problem. Banned, buried, and finally reborn. Rise's Secret Fifth Turtle. Rise's Secret Fifth Turtle is the newest mystery on this list, and it took a cancelled show 4 years and a comic book to finally answer it. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the stylish 2018 reboot, ran 2 seasons before Nickelodeon cut it short in 2020, with the second season shortened and the series effectively paused indefinitely, leaving devastated fans and multiple dangling plot threads. One of those threads had been planted in plain sight for anyone paying attention: the mysterious, ever-present assistant to Big Mama, the spider yokai crime boss. After the cancellation, series writer Ron Corsillo confirmed on social media what the show never got to reveal, that the assistant was secretly a mutant turtle all along, intended to be unveiled as a fifth sibling, and that the character might have gone by the name Frida Kahlo, breaking the Renaissance's naming pattern with a modern painter and adding a sister to the family in the process. The official payoff finally arrived in print. In 2024's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 40th Anniversary Comic Celebration Issue 1, co-showrunner Andy Suriano wrote and drew an epilogue story, fittingly titled Farewell, in which a future version of Leonardo travels back in time to revisit Splinter's death and experience it through his younger self. In the story's emotional gut punch of a final beat, the dying Splinter tells his sons that, by the way, they have another brother and sister, canonizing on the page the reveal the show never aired, and confirming the family was bigger than anyone knew. A background character, a cancelled cliffhanger, and a deathbed confession, resolved not on television but in an anniversary comic most casual fans never even saw. Somewhere out there in that universe, a fifth turtle is still waiting for her episode. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.